Right, so welcome everyone. Thanks Jen and Sarah for doing the introductions. So I'm Becky Wilkinson. I'm Chair of the Forest Education Network for England. I work for the Royal Forestry Society's Teaching Trees programme, so I'll talk to you a bit more about that later on. But just a welcome to FEN England if you haven't come across us before. We've been going for a number of years, but this is a new venture for us in doing webinars. This is our second one. We're looking at doing them roughly monthly, so there'll be the next one. We're not doing December because by this point in December you'll all be tucking into your turkeys. So there'll be another one in January. Do follow, do engage with us through Facebook, through Twitter, because we really want to keep the discussion going and the sharing of the amazing knowledge that's in this group. And we can all learn from each other. So we want to keep doing that until we can start meeting face to face again, hopefully next year. So thanks for registering today's webinar. We're going to be looking at the ways that we can care for our trees and small woodlands, but specifically in terms of education, because there's always that balance there of balancing the needs of the children with the needs of the woodland. So hopefully you'll get some ideas. Jen, you want to pop it onto the next one?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, so this is just to give you an introduction to the timings. So we're going to start off with speaker presentations from Dan from the National Forest, from Jen and from myself. There'll be a quick comfort break at 11, but obviously if you want to dip out any other point, that's absolutely fine. And then the second section of the morning, we're going to go into breakout rooms where there's going to be opportunities to ask questions. If you could keep yourself muted, that just makes it easier for everybody. If you find that this is breaking up, it might be that you've got slow bandwidth where you are. So if in doubt, try turning off your camera, and that can often make it easier for you to hear and to see what's being shared on the screen. If you want to share any links about any programs that you're involved in or things that you're aware of, if you pop those in the chat, and we'll take everything out of the chat at the end and save that as a record for people who, it's like if you can't, because you can't always follow the chat quick enough, but we'll save that and make it available on the Facebook group if people have put relevant links. And we will be recording, as Jen said, this event. So if you would rather that your face or voice weren't included in the recording, please make sure that you've got your camera or your mic off at all times. We won't be recording the breakout rooms because obviously there'll be 3 going on at the same time. So you're free to chat within that one. But do say get involved this morning, share ideas, ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's just a safe space for everyone to share and to learn more about woodland management and how we can support those for the children that we work with. So I'll pass back to Jen.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for that, Becky. Right, there we go. Oh, okay. So, as Becky said, what we try and do in the Forest Education Network England is basically bridge that gap between education and the worlds of forestry and woodland management. So our CPD events and things like this webinar, we try and pull in expertise, but obviously everyone here today has their own expertise. We're all out there working and different types of woodland and forest and schools. So although we've got these presentations to sort of kickstart the webinar today, we'd obviously love to hear from all of you, and already from the introductions I can hear there's lots of you with loads of expertise. So that is the ethos of FEN England, is to share amongst us all. So I'll hand over to Dan Small to start off. We're going to do, there'll be about 10 minutes each, the presentations. So it'll be Dan Small from National Forest first, then I'll do a presentation with Sarah Lawful from Forest School Association, and then Becky will finish up, so we should be done by 11. Okay, Dan.
Morning everyone, I'm Dan Small. I work for the National Forest Company. Just bear with me whilst I share my screen and get my presentation on. Hopefully everyone can see that. Could you give me a nod, Jen, if you can see it?
Yep.
Cool, awesome. So my name is Dan Small. I'm from the National Forest Company. I'm a woodland management officer, so my role is titled Woodland Management Officer. So that involves me providing advice to landowners in and around the National Forest and helping them to plant and manage their woodland. So I studied countryside management course at college and then did a degree based in Northampton, looking at wider land management. And then since I graduated, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but now I worked for a private forestry consultancy for 4 years, and then I joined the National Forest Company 2 years ago. For those of you that don't know about the National Forests, it's not national, confusingly. We're 200 square miles in the Midlands, so based around between Leicester, Nottingham, Derby and Birmingham. In the National Forest, there is 4 main towns, so Burton, Swadlincote, Ashby and Colville. And within that area, there's about 87 primary schools and 24 secondary schools. The National Forest Project is essentially a woodland creation, forest creation project. It started in about 1991, and we had quite a low woodland cover, so 6%. Today, the national average in the UK is 13%, so it was a very underforested area, and the aim of the project was to plant lots of trees. And if we go to 2019, forest cover is up to 21%. Since 1991, we've planted about 9 million trees, and that equates to about 11,000 hectares of forest. So that's 11,000 football or rugby pitches. And just to give, let me just see if I can show you this. I worked out how to do a pointer. Can you see that red pointer? Yeah. So this roundabout here is junction 22 on the M1. So just to give you some a reference point. And now I can't change my screen.
The arrows at the bottom, yeah?
Yeah,
got it. Yeah.
That's cool. So this is an example of what we're doing. So in Sents Valley, which is pretty much in the centre of the National Forest, in about 1995, there was lots of mining and coal extraction that was going on. So the difference between 1995 and 2017, that's exactly the same area, and you can see the considerable change that's happened. So we've been reversing biodiversity loss, restoring degraded landscapes, developing a new woodland economy, giving people outdoor space to enjoy, and what we're trying to do is to show how society can live in a sustainable way, not only incorporating trees and woodlands, but also wider parts of society too. So what I'm going to talk about in this presentation is planting trees and their aftercare, how to manage them as they grow, and a bit of tree jargon explaining. One of the first things to consider when you're looking to plant trees is placement. This is my primary school in Buckinghamshire, and I thought I'd just give an example of what you can think about when you're planting trees. So obviously this is the playing field. Planting trees right in the middle, it's going to disrupt lots of your playtime experiences. So the placement of where the trees are going, thinking about what you've already got. There's a nature conservation area along this side, along the top side of the field. So concentrating the tree planting around that kind of area would be beneficial. It expands a habitat. Other things you've got to think about is how close to the trees, how close to buildings you're going to plant the trees. It's quite deceptive how small the trees are when you first plant them, and they, depending on the different species that you can choose, they will end up growing fairly big. So you need to think about how the canopy of the tree is going to expand, where the roots are going to go, all of those kind of things. So not only looking around you, but looking up. So whether there's power lines or cables running above where you're planting the trees, you need to be considerate of what you're planting and what species you're choosing. So for example, if you're going to plant an oak tree, it's going to it could grow to 20, 30 meters tall. Whereas if you're planting something like a hazel, then that's going to be a lot lower growing. So you need to think about those different kinds of species. If you're planting along the edges of boundaries, next to houses, next to other people's gardens, you need to think about the overhang of trees, where the trees are going to expand to, and the fact they will cast a lot of shade once they've matured. So you need to think about those kind of elements, also around the school environment as well. So you don't want a lovely sunny spot in the classroom blocked out by a load of trees casting shade. And there's also landscape viewpoints as well. So if you've got a really nice view that is beneficial to the environment that you're in, you don't want to be blocking those landscape views by planting trees. I don't know how long this presentation is going to take, but I'm going to quickly try and show you the tree tools for schools website. Can you see that still, Jen?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Nice.
Awesome. So if you go onto the Tree Tools for Schools website, there'll be links and stuff that are shared later. This is hosted by the Woodland Trust. They have a planting planner. So I'll just do an example here and you'll be able to play about with it yourselves. So I'm just going to choose an example. So it helps you through all of these tips, and you can go through at your own pace, and you can also plot your own land. So the first thing to do is to choose a tree pack. So I'm just going to choose random ones. I'm going to choose wild harvest trees. So that's saying within this pack that you can then go on and purchase at the end of this, there's going to be 105 trees. So if you then click onto planting the trees, you can choose to plant them as hedging or as woodland. I'm just going to chuck loads of trees about just by clicking. You can plant them all over the place. You can see the numbers are coming down on the total on the left-hand side. So once you've planted all your trees, there we go. You can then see what they're going to look like as they grow. So in 2 years, this is what they're going to look like. In 10 years, this is what it's going to look like. 20 years, that's what it's going to look like. So it's a great example of thinking about how the trees are going to change the landscape that you're working with. Then it also gives you this function to, is my plan going to work? And it gives you loads of pointers as to things to think about. So if I click on this, it's saying avoid planting near overhead cables. There's another one here. You planted your trees near to the edge of your land. Don't forget to check what's on the other side. Planting trees too close to buildings. So it's a really good check as to what you're planting, where you're planting it, and the different things that you need to think about when that's happening. I'm going to try and get back to my presentation now. Is that okay? Can you see that still, Jen? Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that gives an example of where you're planting trees and what things you need to think about. So now I'm going to look at more about planting and establishing trees. Trees can be planted, the stock that you buy can either be bare root or potted stock. So this is an example of some bare root beech. The difference between bare root and potted is that the bare root trees are a lot less expensive. And if you have a younger tree, the younger the tree it is, the less expensive it's going to be. So if I was to advise somebody that wanted to establish woodland or trees on their land and they had some time to play with, i.e. they've got some time for the trees to grow rather than wanting instant impact, I'd always recommend planting the smallest trees that they can. Trees get stressed, which amuses my friends when I tell them about stressed trees. But if you can do as much as you can to cause the less stress on the tree as possible. So the way to do this is planting in the winter time. So trees go into a state of dormancy during winter, and it allows you to the nurseries to pull up the trees in the winter, put them into cold storage and prepare them for sending out to customers. It also allows you to get the trees in the ground and establishing before the spring comes and before they start growing. So keeping the stress levels on the trees down is important. So with a bare root tree like this, I'll just get my annotator. This is an example of notch planting. So you put the spade into the ground, wiggle it about back and forward, that creates a space, and then you need to wipe the roots into the notch. If the roots don't get into the notch correctly, then the roots can be facing up out of the ground, and that can cause issues as the tree develop. So you need to make sure that the roots of the tree are as they should be, rather than twisted round, pointing out of the ground, all that kind of stuff. So that's an important thing to bear in mind when you're planting bare rooted trees. So then looking at potted trees, because the trees have soil around them, you're essentially taking a little environment with the tree. So that gives you longer planting seasons. So if you're planting into the spring, then you've got a bit more time to play with in terms of causing the less stress possible, or the least stress possible on the tree. So potted trees are good for that, but on the negatives, they are more expensive and they do require a bit more effort with planting. So you need to be digging out a wider hole in the ground for the tree rather than just making that notch. So there's a few pros and cons for planting bare rooted or potted trees. Once the trees are in the ground, you need to think about protecting the trees. So I come from a purely forestry background. I don't have much involvement in education world. So when I was going through this presentation with Jen, I said, oh, I guess there's not really that many deer or rabbits around school areas. And they're like, yeah, well, some people are planting in doing forest schools in a woodland environment, so it's important. And also in schools, you've got kids charging around, footballs, mowers, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, tree protection is really important. So as the trees are establishing, it provides that enough protection to stop browsing animals from munching the trees, but it also will give a visual aid to people if they're strimming around the trees, or if they're going around with mowers, that kind of stuff. It gives that visual aid. So on the right hand side, you can see some plastic tree guards. These are fairly typical of tree planting. There's a big drive to remove as much plastic from the environment as possible at the moment. And on the left hand side, you can see it's a cardboard tree guard. These have been in development for quite a while, and the companies manufacturing them have been playing around with the additives that they put into it to make it as long lasting as possible. So if you just put some cardboard out on a rainy day, it's going to dissolve fairly quickly. So they've got some natural additives that they've impregnated into the cardboard to try and make it a bit more longer lasting. So thinking about these kind of things as you're planting the trees, do you want to speak to the children about plastics in the environment and what kind of things that you can do during the tree planting to bring those points up? Another thing to consider when you're planting and establishing trees is that they can be outcompeted by weeds when they're first planted, if you're planting small trees. So you can see this holly down on the bottom right hand corner of the picture. It's very small, and if you were to leave it unattended, it's going to quickly get swamped by grasses and weeds in that area. So what we've got here is some, I think they're coir mats, and that is designed to suppress the weeds around the tree. It allows the tree to access as much light and water as possible, and gives it the best start in its life. So the other way of doing this is by using herbicides. That's not really applicable when children are close by, so looking at some natural alternatives for this kind of thing is a good way of compromising. Then as the trees get a bit older, you need to think about starting to manage them. So in the top here, we've got let me just get my pointer back. So in this top half of the screen, you've got what a tree would look like if you didn't do any pruning. In the bottom half, you've got a tree that what it would look like if it has been pruned. So you can see pruning at these different stages helps to improve the straightness of the tree. And that is an aesthetic thing, as well as if you're thinking about timber in the future, you want tall, straight trees to put through sawmills. But it's also a health and safety risk as well. If you leave a tree unpruned, you can see this V section here. And that's called a union, where the tree splits into two, or a fork. And this can be fairly weak. As the trees grow, they're pushing out against themselves, and it can cause a weak union. And that is, if you've got loads of kids playing underneath the tree, then that's something that you need to consider. So thinking about pruning and keeping the trees in the best health possible is important to maintain that or reduce the health and safety risk of the trees that you're looking after. So then again, as the trees get older and older, you need to think about thinning. So trees are normally planted, generally in the UK, trees are planted too close together. And the reason they're planted too close together is that you are trying to encourage tall, straight growth to form healthy trees. So the other reason is that you're going to expect some losses in the tree. So some trees aren't going to make it and are going to die. So planting more trees together is a way of accounting for that. So on the left-hand side, you've got an example of a young woodland. As it develops and grows up, the canopies are going to start growing into each other. And as that happens, that can start to cause some of the standing trees to not be able to access as much light as they would like to. So then you need to go through a thinning process. So that's removing trees which have got poor health or poor form. So a lot of you will know about ash dieback. If I had a woodland and it had 10% ash in it, I would consider removing that ash now because the ash trees are going to be structurally unsound going forward with ash dieback. And removing those will allow the remaining trees to access more light and be more healthy. You can see in this last diagram in the right hand side, it also creates a diverse stand structure. So you've got some really tall trees with really tall canopies, some trees right at the ground level and some in between, and that creates really good habitats for lots of different wildlife, like a real diversity in the habitats that are available. This is just a picture of an example of what a healthy woodland can look like. It makes it all better when you've got a nice blue sunny background to the sky as well. But you can see here that we've got the tall canopy trees. So you've got some big tall oak. You've got some lower trees. So there's some field maple and some hazel that is growing up. You've got the hazel coppice that's growing up here too. And then you've got lots of flora on the ground level. So that shows you that diverse stand structure. Just to check your expectations, this is what a woodland looks like after 100 years of growth. So it's not going to do that kind of thing in most people's lifetime. So, but if you've got an existing woodland, you can manage it to look like this kind of thing as it grows. So let's see if this video works. This is me coppicing some hazel. Coppicing is a way of managing certain species of tree. Certain species respond to it better, so things like hazel, willow, alder. It is a way of, traditionally it was used as a method to create lots of small diameter timber that could be used for traditional uses such as making fences, firewood, lots of weaving crafts. But it's also a really good thing to do to increase the longevity of a tree's lifespan. So it essentially reverts it to year zero. Once you coppice it, the tree will respond to that by putting up loads of new shoots, and that cycle it. You can do that every like 7 to 10 years, and that will rejuvenate the tree, and that cycle could keep on going on and on forever. The other good thing about doing this kind of management is that the people doing the management can see the response of the tree within a year. So normally after you coppice, for example, a hazel, you'll probably get up to a meter's worth of regrowth in the next year. So it's a really quick win in terms of seeing habitat creation and how it can be done. Oh, there's the video again. This is an example of pollarding. So pollarding is essentially the same as coppicing, but you're doing it up in the air. And traditionally it was used as a way of creating that small diameter timber, but out of the reach of browsing animals, so out of the reach of deer and rabbits and that kind of stuff. Once you've started pollarding, you have to keep on doing it. So the top example is what I think pollarding should look like. So you've got lots of small diameter branches that are then trimmed back. After it's been pollarded, you've got lots of knuckles, and that process will again continue after on a process of 7 to 10 years. The bottom example, you've got a really big canopy and you're reducing that canopy very severely. And what that does that is different from the top is that you're taking lots of large diameter branches down, and that creates lots of big wounds on the tree. So sometimes tree surgeons will advise to reduce the canopy of the tree, for example, to allow light down onto the ground, into buildings and that kind of stuff. And what it does do is that it will damage the tree's response to it. So it will create lots of big wounds, and that will hinder the tree's response. So now some jargon busting. If I quickly describe these, if you've got any questions about them, we can pick them up in the breakout rooms. So a felling license. A felling license is something that you need to fell trees. So it's administered by the Forestry Commission, and essentially it's to protect woodland. So if you're looking at felling any trees within your land, you need to consider a felling license. There are exemptions out there as well, so I can go into those in more detail if you want me to. A woodland management plan essentially describes what you've got in your woodlands at the moment, where you want your woodland to be in the future, and the steps that you are going to take to achieve that vision. A tree safety survey is a survey of the trees that you've got on your land, looking at the safety requirements or the safety attributes of those trees. So you're looking for any damage, any fungal growth, any risks that could be a damage to people and the environment if they're to be left. And then the next 4 points are different type of tree people. So you've got a tree surgeon. They're focused around management of one tree, and they're looking at removing the tree in total or removing parts of the tree to either improve the tree's health, so by removing deadwood, that kind of thing, or removing the tree in total where it's a health and safety risk. An arborist is kind of a bit of a catch-all of a tree surgeon and an arboricultural consultant. So it's a bit more ambiguous term. An arboricultural consultant is somebody that would be able to look at more of the do more of the tree safety surveys and look at how trees interact with the environment. So it's a bit more theoretical than a tree surgeon. A tree surgeon is more practical side of things. And then a forester is somebody that looks at, rather than managing a single tree, they're managing a whole woodland, so many trees and how they interact with each other as a whole. I appreciate that I've talked a bit longer than I should have done, so this is my final slide, and if you've got any questions, then please take note of them and bring them to the breakout sessions later. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. So yeah, if you just take down your slideshow. Fantastic. Well, I think I probably speak on everyone's behalf to say that was pretty much what the perfect presentation as an educator I've been seeking for years, of like, you know, the A to Z of forestry very rapidly. So thank you so much for packing so much in. I think you may have mentioned at the beginning that you may not have, actually, I wasn't listening properly, about your waiting to qualify to be a nice Institute of Chartered Forester. Is that right? Yes.
So the Institute of Chartered Forester is it's essentially a process that I'm going through to show people that I'm professional. So I'm just at the final stages of that, and hopefully I'll find out on the 11th of December.
Well, basically you've passed, because that was awesome. So yeah, really great. There's lots of feedback on the chat, and obviously for those who joined a bit after the beginning of this webinar, just a quick recap. I'm Jen Hurst, the host. We've got several folks here from the FENE England network who are presenting today. We're going to carry on the presentations up to 11 and keep you all unmuted. Sorry about that, but just so we can get through the content by 11, and then we'll get into breakout groups, and you'll have a chance to ask questions directly to Dan and all the others, as well as amongst yourselves. There's lots of expertise here today. So, you know, if you're desperate to post a question in chat, do, but we won't answer those as we go along. We'll do those in the second half of the webinar, and we will have a comfort break at 11. So I'm just going to rejig the programme because Becky needs to go at 11. So I'm going to hand over to Becky Wilkinson from Royal Forestry Society. Thanks again to Dan, and this flows very nicely from everything Dan was saying. So yeah, over to you, Becky.
Okay, so
you've got your
presentation. I've got my presentation, yeah. So thanks to Jen and to Dan for starting us off there. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Programme Officer for the Royal Forestry Society's Teaching Trees programme. We work on an average year, which this year has been anything but we normally work with around 10,000 children a year, getting them out into woodlands to visit them and learn about them, but we also do a lot of work going into schools, supporting schools with woodland development within their site, and particularly getting the children involved in that. So Jen asked if I would talk this morning specifically about our Junior Forester Award. So I'm going to pop up a few slides on that. All right, let's see. All right, can you see my slides, Jen?
Yeah, I can see.
Great.
Yeah, it's not on slideshow yet.
Yeah, no, I'm just, there we are. Are we on slideshow? Yeah, great. Okay, so the RFS Junior Forester Award, it came out of a lot of schools asking us to work with small groups of children, getting them engaged. We know I've been a teacher or worked in education my whole career, that lots of schools have children who are on the school library committee, they have the eco council, they have the book person, but actually what we wanted was to encourage children to think about that some children could be in charge of the school woodland, and they could be the junior foresters for their school, they could help manage it, and they could take a real pride and responsibility in what they were doing. So we piloted this with a number of schools in Staffordshire, and then a couple of years ago we rolled this out nationwide. So just a bit of background before we go into too much on Junior Foresters Award. It's fine if you're sitting there thinking, this is lovely, but I've never actually heard of the Royal Forestry Society, because I'll admit that I hadn't before I went to work for them. We're a very well kept secret within the forestry world. So we're an education charity. We actually have over 3,500 members. We've been going for a really long time. We tend to be well known among foresters and woodland owners. We're about promoting really good quality woodland management. Because healthy woodlands are lovely places to visit, they produce sustainable timber for our economy, and they're great environments for our wildlife. And so that's the Royal Forestry Society. Junior Forester Award, this isn't like a subtle sales pitch, it is entirely free to download. We're not profiting from this. We just want to support as many schools and organisations as possible in their children getting engaged in woodland management, because we found from talking to schools, a lot had 15 trees in the corner of the field that had got really overgrown and they didn't know what to do with them. Or the alternative was that they were doing something great with those trees, but they were predominantly doing bushcraft or outdoor play or outdoor learning, but they weren't actively engaging in managing that area so that it could be the best quality woodland that it could be, and really make a lovely resource for the children. So the Junior Forester Award is about bringing underused, underutilised woodlands back into use with children's help. But we also think about encouraging children for the skills needed for a career in forestry. Very few children grow up thinking I want to be a forester unless they directly know somebody that works in forestry. It tends to be one where you follow other family members in, and actually we want to make that change. There are huge numbers of job vacancies in forestry, and we need more children thinking about following like the really diverse career opportunities that there are. So it's about practical ways to get children involved, and it's lovely when we're working with schools and some of them have said, you know, children have said to me, you know, I've never thought of this before, but now I've realised that I could be really good at this. This is my thing. And it lets different children really shine in what they're doing. We've been running it nationally for over 2 years now. This year we've had, I think it's about 7,500 children registered take part in the academic year 2020-2021, but registrations are completely open, so do, if you think this looks interesting, pop along to our website afterwards and register to get the full course materials. Right. One of the things we do in the Junior Forester Award is we discover that lots of children don't have the language to describe the woodlands around them. And one of the things about forestry is we need the right tree in the right place. But to know where that right place is, we need to know what the trees are in the first place. So we encourage the children to learn the names of their trees, not in a science lesson way, in a fun, engaging way. But actually, if they don't know what the trees are, they can't start to appreciate their individual characteristics. Right, so a bit of engagement. These are the top 6 tree species in England. Let's see if some people can pop them in the chat. How quick of the fire can you be? What 6 are these tree species? I'm going to watch for these chat comments coming in. Don't all shout at once. Do I see you typing? Oh. Oh, there we go. No, I've got 9 comments. Sorry, they all appeared at once. I'm blaming bandwidth. Ah, yes, well done. So you're correct. So we have oak in the top corner. I'm going to put my screen share back on. Yes, oak, ash. Does anybody know? Nobody so far. I'm seeing them all correct apart from, oh, yes, well done, Julia. Yeah, so Julia is correct. We do have a spruce down in the bottom corner. They're the ones that I always get stumped on because there are so many of them. Right, so let's pop the screen share back on. Sorry, I realise I'm talking to myself and you can't see my screen.
Okay. All good. That's fun. I've been itching to have an interactive Zoom webinar. That's brilliant. More quizzes. We want more quizzes.
Right, hang on, let's pop that back on. Yeah, right, let's go through. Right, so yeah, top species in England. So yes, well done. I think we got all of them together there. So we have oak. Oak makes up 14% of English woodlands. We have ash, 10% when last surveyed, but as Dan said, ash dieback is obviously a huge problem. So if you currently do have ash in your in the woodland that you're using, that's something you need to be considering. Birch, I wouldn't have guessed was so high, makes up 8% of our woodlands. And then let's keep going on. So Sitka spruce was possibly the sort of the dark horse in that one at 7%. And then the prolific grower, I was surprised actually that this one wasn't higher because it seems to be everywhere where I am. Sycamore coming in at 6%. and then beech also at 6%. So those are our top trees. So the woodlands that you're working with children, they might have some of those in there, but it's just about, like I say, giving them the language to start talking about the different features. My children now, I've had it pressed into them, they know, they're like, Mummy, no, it's under the beech tree, because they drop limbs, and they know that we don't have picnics under beech trees. So actually giving children the names to discuss the different trees and start thinking about the different features can be really interesting. Right, so we talk to children as well in junior foresters about the contribution that timber makes to the rural economy. Actually, we've got 43,000 people employed in the timber industry, with 11.8 million tonnes of timber produced annually. But as a country, we're bringing in we're the biggest net importer of timber anywhere in Europe. We're bringing it in from abroad. So it's talking to children that this has careers elements to it as well, and saying, you know what, you could be a contributor to sorting out the climate crisis by learning about forestry, helping to manage the school woodland, and then going forwards into a career in a really sustainable industry. One of the other aspects we talk about, so 2 of the sessions in Junior Forester Award are thinking about how the children can encourage wildlife into the school woodland. And that's really important, having set aside areas that will often work with the children to create things called dead hedges. So we'll stack up some old brash, some old logs, and we'll create areas where the children aren't going to go into, where the logs aren't going to be used for dens, and we're just going to leave that one. It's lovely. One of the first schools I started working with have now got a family of almost tame shrews, believe it or not, and they run across the fire circle in the middle of the session, from the wildlife area between the children and back into the wildlife area again. And the children just love it. But that's because we made a real point of having these set aside areas right in amongst the learning areas, that the animals feel quite safe to thrive there. So that's a really important consideration in junior foresters. And then we also, something that's not traditionally considered, we talk to the children about woodlands as tourist destinations. So this slide that you're seeing here, if you've never been but you live in the area, this is Hockeridge Wood down in Hertfordshire, just outside Berkhamsted. It's absolutely beautiful. It's an RFS woodland with some really rare trees, so do go. It's entirely free to visit. But we talk to children about woodlands as tourist destinations, and actually if they want a career in leisure and hospitality, that they could combine that with forestry. So we're trying to get children thinking broadly. One of the things we started with Junior Forester Award was we wanted children, we wanted it to work in a variety of settings, and we're conscious that not everybody has access to tool use or wants to do planting. So we put 2 pathways in there. We put in, you can see myself and my colleague Alice taking part in a tree planting day. That was one of the schools in Stoke we worked with, and you can see there the school we started working with them, a lovely forest school area, but a really ugly metal fence with a scrapyard behind it, that's just not attractive, it's not pleasant, it wasn't adding any amenity. So we planted, that hedge is mostly hawthorn, a whole load of like applied a natural boundary as it grows up, much more wildlife, much more pleasant for the children than seeing the scrap metal yard behind them. So that's our planting pathway. The other option in Junior Forester Award, I'm afraid, is not that the RFS brings your school a lovely timber harvester. But when I came to put this presentation together, I realised they didn't actually have any pictures of me using a bow saw or a lopper with children. So I put in a timber harvester from one of our sites. But the other option is tool use. So getting children thinking not just about how to use a bow saw to make a wood cookie or to do a craft activity within the forest school, but actually how they can use those bow saws or loppers to manage their own sites. And I just love doing that with children, getting them, because they're like, what, you're going to let me cut a bit off a real tree, not just the pre-prepared log you've brought for me? And that's a really exciting opportunity for them. Or even Dan said about felling licenses. But if you've got, and you're appropriately qualified to do it, some very, very small trees in the wrong place, tree felling with 3-year-olds can be really exciting. And it's something that when I see them years later, they still tell me they can remember when I let them cut down a whole tree. So there's lots of great opportunities to get children really doing that woodland management and engaging in it. Yeah, so that is Junior Forester Award. So do come and talk to me in the breakout rooms or have a look on our Facebook page for more details. Like I say, it's entirely free to download. We just want as many children as possible thinking in the broadest sense about careers in forestry, but also actively engaging with managing their school woodlands and making them really great places to be. So I will hand back to Jen.
Thank you very much. Again, another brilliant presentation. So much in that as well, Becky, about involving the young people and adults we work with in woodland management, forestry and trees, and on a practical level, which is, obviously going on in forest schools and outdoor education a lot, but taking it that bit further and engaging with the forestry industry as well. Fantastic. Right, for those of you who have just arrived in the last half hour or so, we're going through the presentations first up until just after 11. We'll probably run over by 5 minutes. I'm keeping you all on mute while we're doing the presentations, and then we'll have breakout sessions from 10 past 11 where you can ask all the presenters questions and share information and ideas amongst yourselves as well in your groups. We're recording the presentations but not the breakout groups. Okay, so I am now going to finish up with Sarah Lawful, and I are going to do a bit more on caring for your trees in terms of pests and diseases, management and wildlife. So hopefully between the three of us we've nearly covered everything about caring for your trees in schools or woodland sites. So let's open this one up. Right, sorry, bear with me here. This is where we need some music playing. So I will be invited
Do a dance
later. Thank you. Keep going. They haven't invented commercial breaks yet, have they? Right. Okay. Could someone give me a wave if you can see my presentation? Yes. Great. Good. Okay. Let's get. There we go. Right. We're off. Yeah. All good. Thumbs up, Becky. And down. Yeah. Good. Okay. So. So as we know, we don't need to tell you all this, the best classroom is roofed by the sky. This was a lovely bench made by some woodworkers at the who are based at the Silver Foundation here in Oxfordshire, where I'm based. I used to work for the Silver Foundation for 6 happy years, and this was the leaving present, and very nice it is too. If you'd like one, jump on their website and you can order one too. So I think as an educator myself, I'm a geography teacher by background, a forest school leader, trained level 3. And as I said, I've worked for the national charity Silver Foundation for 6 years with lots of you who are here today and other organisations in the country. As educators, we're not expected to know all this amazing technical knowledge that people like Dan have, and the forestry and ARB world have, and often it's how do we find that information out. So that's why I particularly love the Forest Education Network, because that's one way of finding out information and educating ourselves, but also getting the experts onto our sites, into our school grounds to help us as well. So I want to focus on that with pests and diseases, and looking at, obviously we know the best places outdoors to learn, but we also don't want to trash that amazing resource. So we have a responsibility with our children, young people, to show them that we're stewards of the outdoors as well as using it. And I have spent many years telling people and defending our sector to say we don't go out and use forests as a playground. We go out there and learn about them, respect them, and actually manage them. Sometimes we manage our sites better than some of the foresters, controversially, but I'll have that argument with Dan later. So really, in my experience as a forest school leader, forest educator, if we're going to try and work out how healthy or not our trees are, it's exactly as Becky says, we got to work out what's on our sites. So I just encourage you to have fun with identification. Lots of you probably do this already. There's a group of forest school leaders there that Sarah Lawful and I were training last year, playing games as we would with the children, tree ID, meet a tree, blindfold yourself and meet a tree, and then play leaf snap. You can put leaves on a white sheet, and then everyone scurries around the woodland or the school grounds looking for the identical leaf, and if you put it on the same leaf, you can shout snap very loudly and competitively, so you can make it as competitive you want or as collaborative as you want. I've done this with 3-year-olds and 8-year-olds. So make it fun, and then you can get all the identification resources out once everyone's got excited about the fact that trees are different. So there on the ground you can see a lot of the Woodland Trust resources, which are all still free. They can be found on Tree Tools for Schools still. You can download them, laminate them. Mine have lasted for years, and there's plenty of other websites too that we'll mention at the end that have resources. And the other one I've found really useful is Field Studies Council, with their lovely fold out identification charts that are already come laminated, and they're very reasonable. You can jump on their website and order those, and of course make your own resources. Part of the fun is you know, drying some leaves, and you can laminate them, as you can see with the forest school leaders. They see a shiny laminated leaves, and those last forever as well. I know we're trying to reduce our plastic, but I've had some laminated leaves that are getting on for 10 years old, and just easy for little ones to use. So yeah, identify those trees on your site. Also, you can use tree cookies and label them. So something we did with Mandy Warwick, who's here today, in her after school session, forest school after school session. And you know, the children can come and go to that ID sheet as they're in their forest school session or outdoor learning session, and learn at their own pace, which is quite nice, having it all spread out on the ground. So once you've worked out what you've actually got on your site, for many of us now, whether you're forest school or outdoor learning, and especially with COVID, we're starting to go out and see our trees more regularly, and that is a perfect opportunity to monitor the trees. We are the eyes and ears for tree health. We see them change throughout the season. So what I've put up here is something that's on the Silver Foundation website. It's called My Forest. It's a suite of tools designed for woodland owners, but also educators now. So we've called the educator section My Forest for Education. If you jump onto My Forest, you'll see it's all laid out there. So what we did with funding from the Ernest Cook Trust when I was working for Silver was to develop more specific resources around pests and diseases and things that we notice on trees, so that we can all get involved with reporting when we see these pests and diseases, or when we see something and we know it's okay. So there's an awful lot of information out there on pests and diseases, but not all of it sort of in a format we can use as educators. So this was why we did it. And I say we grandly, but actually it was the amazing Elsa Field, who's not here today, but she's a PhD intern that came to us last year, and her specialism was this plant herbivores and forestry. So she pretty much did this herself. So I'm not going to take credit for this. So on this website, these are all free downloads. You can see there we've got a summary sheet, a fact sheet, what to look out for, as Dan mentioned, with things like ash, dieback, what are the key features, and we haven't got this fella yet, the emerald ash borer, have we? Dan, don't think, no. So keep your eyes peeled, because if they arrive, we need to report that. So so where do we report these things? Well, at the bottom of this sheet, there's a link to the Forestry Commission research group called Tree Alert, forestresearch.gov.uk. So jump on that website. If you're not sure, it's best to say. You can report in, and they can map where they're noticing these tree pests and diseases. So just to show you another one, our oak trees are not all of them, but some of them are getting this sort of fungal disease that's causing weeping. So again, if you notice that sort of black weepy mark on an oak tree, obviously don't touch it. A lot of these things, you know, if they're oozing or they're fungi, educate your children not to touch them for their own safety, but also so we don't spread these into other woodlands. What's interesting about this fact sheet is it also shows you things not to worry about. So you've got mildew, powdery mildew on oak leaves, so that's just natural. And then Elsa, being an expert in plant herbivores, showed me the millions of little nibbles and tunnels and galls that all the little insects are building all the time on leaves. And there's a whole world. If you zoom in on one of these creatures, they are the cutest, fluffiest little insects you've ever seen. And that's just normal, you know, that's the ecosystem at work there. This oak processionary moth, again, there are safety aspects of some of these pests and diseases. So their hairs on the caterpillar of the moth are very itchy, and again, you know, just keep away. So some of this is about protecting our trees, and some of this is about protecting us from the things that are attacking them. And again, if you notice these things, jump on the Tree Alert website, or, you know, and if you do get to know some of the experts that Dan mentioned, you know, the arborists and the foresters in your local area, or tree surgeons, always talk to them. You know, they'll have expertise on how to deal with them. So there's more fact sheets on that website. I won't go through them all right now, but just to flag that up to you. And if you are really interested, obviously, you know, there is a huge amount on pests and diseases out there as well, if you start digging around. So being conscious about our impact on our sites. One of the things we developed at Silver Foundation was a guide to both the negative and positive impacts we can make on our sites, school grounds or forest school sites. Forest school leaders have to do an ecological impact assessment as part of their management plan. But if you're not doing forest school, it's still really good practice. You know, a lot of it is obvious, and we wanted to try and show ways you could overcome some of these potential impacts. So things like dividing up the types of wood you use on your site. So some logs are for den building, some are going to be for firewood, and some you're going to leave, like Becky said, for like dead piles of wood for bugs. So, you know, and working with the children to understand the differences in those different types of wood. So you don't want to be trashing your habitat pile every time you want to build a den. So there's lots of different ideas in here, and ways of overcoming things like ropes, protecting the tree bark, trying to, if you're using a fire pit all the time, trying to put wood chip down to protect that from erosion. But what I've noticed in the lucky position I've had of going around lots and lots of schools and forest school sites in my time is how much we actually improve biodiversity of sites and the health and the management of woodlands. And you know, it's hard, but often we make a place better through our actions, and there's lots of ideas there for habitat piles and ponds and willow tunnels and, you know, all kinds of things. So have a look at those, and talk amongst ourselves, because we're all up against this. We all want to get our children out. We all want to increase the numbers of people outside. So we've got to try and balance that. So just on a site, I used to work in Oxford, West Killington Primary School, just to give you an example. Obviously masses of erosion from things like mud kitchens, and you can see around the base of that tree the compaction of the soil from lots of little feet. And these are only nursery and foundation children, but they still have an impact, and the roots starting to stick up. So not great news for that hornbeam tree there. It's going to be damaging the roots and its growth. So on someone else's site, there you can see these little fences that they've put up with the children, little sort of mini hurdles. Very simply, just as I think Dan touched on, just a visual barrier to children or adults or the mower to let that area recover. And you know, and again, they've done some new planting, and they've just put that little barrier up in front of the newly planted trees. So these things don't have to be expensive or costly, and you don't have to put up ugly fencing. You know, use what you've got on site and do it with the children, so you don't have to be there hours and hours yourself. And they'll obviously love it as well. Right, so what I'll do now is just hand over to Sarah to carry on about other ways we can improve wildlife on our sites and some of the things the FSA are doing. So if we say another 5 minutes, then we'll have a comfort break.
Thank you, Jen. That was really great. Lovely to hear all those resources that are on My Forest. And just to say that we use that a lot with our forest school training. And we were delighted as well to have you and Elsa come and lead one of our FSA webinars, which I'd love to also tip people off, that we have monthly webinars as the Forest School Association, which anyone is welcome to join in with. They are free, and you can sign up for the newsletter, which will give you information about those as well. So do check out the Forest School Association website. What I would also love to enthuse about is this Woodland Wildlife Toolkit. Jen and I were lucky enough to go up to the National Forest for the launch of this, and I have to confess, I got a bit weepy. I was so excited by it, because within the forest school world and within school and education, we know that we need technology. We know technology is really valuable and important, but often it can feel a bit purposeless when we're using it in school. And this, for me, is the most amazing tool to engage children and young people in understanding where the ecology and the exciting things that are happening out in their school grounds or in their forest school site can really be improved and supported through technology. So it's about bringing ancient wisdom and ancient learning and modern technology and modern learning, and then putting them together to create an education approach that is absolutely relevant for children, young people, and for all of us working in the environmental world. So I cannot tell you how exciting this tool is. It is just brilliant. You can put your school, or what's the word I'm looking for, your GPS coordinates or your postcode into this tool, and find your forest school site or your school grounds or your outdoor learning area or nature reserve in your school grounds. You put it into this toolkit, and it comes up and shows you what amazing protected species especially are in the environment around you. It won't necessarily say that you've got those creatures living, or those plants, those bryophytes, those fungi in your school grounds, but what it will do is give you the picture of where you're sitting and how you can then create habitats and promote biodiversity within your own piece of land or your area that you've got responsibility for. And this for children is hugely engaging, because it will give you all the ways that you can actually do that for a particular species. And children will start to get to know how to look for those things as well. So really identifying, what does this butterfly look like? What does its food stuff need to be? How are we going to make sure that we don't damage the nettles, or we protect this area? So it's very much linking in that ecology with things that are going to fascinate children as well. So I absolutely love this and highly recommend it to you. And well, I can enthuse for hours. I will stop, because I'm sure that, like me, you probably need a wee and a cup of tea. What we've got, yeah, I was just going to say, Jen, so these resources here are really useful. I would really recommend as well the Woodland Trust. So they've got the tree tools for schools, and they also have, if I can wait, I don't know if you can see this. Does that work for you to see that, Jen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you go on the Woodland Trust website, they've got the Green Tree Schools Award, which is also worth having an explore of. And that links brilliantly with the Junior Foresters Award too. So there are masses of resources out there. And the last thing before we go, I just would like to plug the Nature Premium campaign, which some of you may have heard of already. There are organisations across the country have joined with some volunteers from the Forest School Association to create a new campaign, which is really gaining traction with government and with policymakers. We're asking for statutory funding for children in schools and nurseries to have access to nature as part of the curriculum. So in the way that the sports premium was funded through a levy on sugar and sugar tax, we're asking for a green levy with businesses to actually then fund nature connection and outdoor learning and make that a statutory requirement, because we know some schools do it brilliantly and some schools do not have any of the resources or the support or the training. And we're actually saying for every child in this country to have access to nature, we need it to become part of the curriculum and part of what our government are saying is the green recovery. So I'd love to invite you to explore the Nature Premium campaign. I will pop it in the chat box. And I think now is time for a wiggle and a wee. We're good at weeing behind trees and things, aren't we, in the forest, in forest education?
That's
Hopefully
right.
you have a toilet in your house.
Yes, we tree. Okay, so thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to all the presenters. I'm going to suggest we have a comfort break now of about 5 minutes. So tea, if you don't want to do either of those, you're welcome to stay.
But they don't want to let any other trees grow because they just take care of other oak trees. So I just love this book, and it's great for the young children. I'm in primary school and they like to have a look through it. So just recommend that tree. That's it.
Would you please stick it in the chat, and anybody else who's got any other books that they want to recommend, and then I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Can I just add in on that if you want to take that looks like a fantastic book and resource for young people. If you want to take that to a sort of adult, more scientific level, then The Secret Network of Nature and The Secret Network of Trees by Peter Wohlleben is an absolutely fantastic read if nobody's seen it or read it, and it goes into all of that interconnectedness of nature and trees looking after each other and forming communities and families and support, and in lots and lots more details. It's absolutely brilliant, really good.
Great, thank you, Andy. If you could pop that in the chat, that would
I will. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other book recommendations? All right, no, just stick them in the chat, or keep them coming on the FEN Facebook page. We've got about 15 minutes. I wondered if we could just hear back from each of the breakout groups. So Dan and Becky, what was...
One of the things that came up in our group was we were talking about some overgrown hazel coppice and how best to manage it with people, practitioners that aren't especially qualified in tree felling. And my recommendation was to try and find if there's any local conservation groups that have got the kit and the qualifications to cope with some of the larger trees. So yeah, that was one of the points that we were talking about. We're also looking at different species of wildflowers that could be introduced, and how to being patient and seeing what else is growing through naturally before we go ahead and plant stuff.
Great. Okay. Good. Anything else from that group anybody else wanted to chip in?
Yes, Dan was very helpful for me because I introduced some hazel into a public woodland that I work in with permission, and it was probably about 2.5–3 years ago, and I wasn't sure how do you need to leave hazel a certain time before you can actually coppice it sort of almost down to ground level, and Dan was saying no, go for it, cut it down, it will come back.
Yeah, fantastic. Great.
That was very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Fru. Well, the same with willow, it's pretty indestructible, isn't it? Let's keep cutting. Lovely. So group 2, was that Sarah, your group?
Thank you. Great sharing of questions and ideas and resources. So we got into the books, and it was interesting. We were a lovely mixed group of people who are educators, people with land, people with background in other areas coming into sort of forest education. So that was really exciting. Jenny Connor is still on the call and has a farm which has got all sorts of exciting tree planting going on, and is really wanting to know how to get more of the community involved, and what might that look like. So if anybody had a very speedy response to that.
Ask your local WI. The WI are quite big on tree planting. They're part of the Climate Coalition.
Oh, that's a good tip. That's good to know.
Okay, thanks. I could do that. I was really wanting to get the local schools more involved, so it's trying to find how to get those engaged.
Isn't a Tree for Schools campaign, or does that not exist anymore? Or Free Trees for Schools, something like that?
Yeah, the Woodland Trust still give out free trees to schools and community groups. So yes, I think probably finding a friendly head teacher locally who you can explain, that you've got a bit of land and you've got trees you want to plant, and and then it'll be up to them to figure out the, you know, the cost of transport and how they're going to get the children there, and the health and safety and the risk assessments, and which is all, you know, they can overcome all those things if they want to, but it's, you know, it is one of those things, I think, to find a head teacher who really will value that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's the trick, is I need to find the key to engaging
Jenny,
with
can I
the
ask
people
where about
in charge.
Jenny, can I ask where about in the country you are?
I'm in North East England, in County Durham.
Was we have an education officer in County Durham, so if you email me, I'll put my email in the chat. I'll see if I can't promise anything, but I can certainly see what I can do, because that is a community that we work in, and that's exactly what we do. We connect schools and woodland owners. So if I can knock on a few doors for you, I might be able to help.
That would be really helpful, thank you.
Can I contribute an idea as well? Is that?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jenny, I don't know how it works in that area, but in Liverpool, the heads of primary schools in a certain location, and also secondary heads, have meetings, maybe, I don't know how often, maybe once a term, just to share ideas. And I managed to sort of get away into one of those meetings just to present about Forest School. And actually, if you're offering something, they're really happy just to give you the, well, I found in Liverpool, you know, they're really happy to give me the floor for sort of 10 minutes, and then at least you're getting all the heads in one room at the same time. So I'm not sure how it works in your area, but there would be a head out there that would know the best.
Yeah, I've done similar. So I think it's easier in some counties than others. Different counties organise differently, but we've done a lot of that in some areas. And like I say, it's great because 5 minutes you get to talk to 20 heads, and then the ones who are interested can come find you afterwards. So great, thanks for sharing that.
Do these meetings get advertised anywhere online or anything?
No, that's the trick, is finding where they take place. But if you know anybody who works in the school, that's how I manage to get into these things. Usually I ask someone who knows someone who knows someone, and then it can take a little while.
Yeah, and also I found that I think my contact wasn't actually a head themselves, it was somebody to do with the council who was actually the person who was coordinating the meetings, and they were the key person to get hold of. But again, it will differ from county to county.
Everywhere's different, but yeah, just nudging a few doors and you can often find the right person.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do, so I'll keep knocking.
Yeah, do email me and I'll see if I can put you in contact with someone in your area.
Okay, thanks very much.
Jen, may I just say,
sorry, Sarah.
Sorry, Becky. I was just going to say there's a question in the chat from Rachel about language and communication. But what I would say is, as the Forest School Association, we're running these webinars as well every month, and we're looking for people who would like to suggest topics for those webinars. So we could even go to say, well, how do we develop community connection? For example, that could be a topic for a webinar. And we also could look at that language and communication within Forest School or within a forest education context. And that's a big part of what all of us are working towards, is how do we connect people and get those opportunities for bringing experts and all of us together so that we can all learn from each other. So if you're not a member of the FSA but would like to find out about the FSA and how to get connected in to receive the newsletter and things like that, you know, do check on the website or just email me, and I'll pop my email in the chat as well.
Yeah, if I just sort of answer like the specific from Rachel and to Jen, speech and language and communication is a personal passion of mine, and it's something that we've done quite a lot of work with a few schools who are particular speech and language schools, and in using the woodland and environment to support the children in developing their speech and language. So if you find my email on the chat, just have a look up at it, and then if you want to email me any specifics, I'm conscious we're running out of time, but I can talk to you about how we've supported those schools and how the speech and language. And Sarah, if you want us to come in on an FSA webinar, we'd be happy to contribute on that, because that's my passion. So yeah, do ask us.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, loads going on in the groups. Just to wrap up then from group 3, where I was, what were we talking about? Oh yes, Scotland, Bonnie has shared a link that I'll put on the chat with more resources about tree health, and has encouraged more communication between Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, as ever. We all need to keep chatting because there's lots of good stuff going on between our countries. Perhaps that's something we can do on our FENE Facebook page. Link up a bit more there. we were talking about, you know, who to reach out to when we need safety checks and expertise on our sites, and the challenges of, you know, city and county council tree officers being very busy or not being able to come, but we need to pester them because they need to realise we are out there in the trees a lot more than they think most of the time. You know, common sense advice that Andy and his company encourage, that we don't want to chop it all down, but neither do we want to let it go too crazy and be dangerous, our tree management. Yeah, and also trusting your instincts. Once you've been on your site a while, or in the school grounds a while, you know your trees well. So, you know, get the experts in, but also tell them what you're noticing if there's any changes to trees. Andy flagged up rewilding, which I'm sorry we haven't had much time to talk about, but it's a huge topic, and I think it's extremely relevant to all of us, because effectively school grounds that are deserts, where we're mowing all the grass, we are rewilding our school grounds, whether it's forest school or outdoor learning. And I think we've got a huge role to play as educators to participate in the rewilding sort of movement. You know, so getting away from formal management and manicuring our sites and school grounds, but to a much more relaxed approach. And obviously we have to educate the head teachers and the contractors and the teachers that it's okay for it looked a bit scruffy and a bit wild, and that's good for the children and it's good for nature. So yes, if again we can help each other, you know, support each other in convincing the rest of the school community that it's okay for it not to look manicured. So I think maybe even a webinar or another session on rewilding, actually, that FEN or FSA could run would be fantastic, because there's so much happening in that field at the moment. If anybody, we've got about 5 minutes. Would anybody else like to ask?
Can I ask a question,
sure.
Please? So is there out there that anybody knows of, or is there a piece of work being done for head teachers and SLTs in very cash-strapped schools on common sense advice, guidance on their land management, and perhaps tree care plans as well for their schools? Because, you know, we visit a number of you know, state primary schools typically, you know, whereby budgets for you know, sort of maintenance and site maintenance have been, you know, sort of slashed, and really all they're doing is getting somebody in to cut the grass and do very little else. And I just want, you know, I love this idea. One of the things that I've gleaned from the session this morning is sort of school communities, be they teachers, students, parents, kind of taking charge of their own environment quite a lot more. And I just wondered if there's a piece of work perhaps to kind of pull all of these lovely organizations together to offer just a guidance pack for a time and cash strapped head teacher, to say, here are some top tools, here are the things to avoid, here are some kind of, you know, directions of travel to go in, and this is how you can bring your school community in to make your site the best it can be, really, you know, in all of the ways that we've been talking about. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
I don't think it exists, but it's certainly the sort of thing that FENE wants to support people with. So it's something that as we could have a look at developing. Jen, Sarah?
Definitely, and I think Learning Through Landscapes has got good resources, Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, and it is part of what we've put into the Nature Premium campaign. It's very much, this is about giving ownership to the children and to the community, so that you have this is part of the green recovery, rather than saying we're going to wait until people get to adulthood and then get engaged in green recovery. We're saying if we did it now, from nursery age up, that absolutely this would be a valuable outcome of it, because you'd be funding schools to get the training, get in the experts, have the resources, the equipment, the clothing, all of those things could come out of a Nature Premium. So Andy, I would say please look at the website and have a chat with me if you'd like to get your logo onto that, and if you'd like to help us with it. But it's definitely something that, you know, in terms of the actual reality of making it happen, the resources, FENE could be a valuable part of making something like that happen.
And I appreciate that, Sarah, and I completely understand where you're coming from. I guess what I'm trying to seek is a sort of you know, low impact, ease of access route in for busy head teachers that just say, just go and look here, and here's a simple site or a portal or a pack that could be sent to you, which just gives you, you know, 6 or 10 action plan starting points to kind of get going with. It's you know, teachers will reach out, some, but a lot won't, you know, if it kind of requires, you know, we know what they're like. They're all very busy, and, you know, it's sort of, you know, time is of the essence. And I just wondered if we, you know, or you know, collectively, we could work together to provide a really simple set of tips and tools.
That'd be brilliant, wouldn't it?
It would.
My other recommendation, if you're looking for expertise in a cost neutral way, is to contact local colleges or universities. If it could be used as an example site for either doing practical work or for theoretical work, such as a woodland management plan or something like that. Colleges and universities always are after local examples of that kind of stuff, so that might be an opportunity for getting some expertise, even if they're new expertise, onto the site.
Thanks, Dan. That's great. Well, thank you all for participating today. There's some excellent points raised and questions, and heaps of ideas of ways that Forest Education Network England could be supporting you all, or yeah, we've got quiz ideas, we've got other webinar ideas. That's been really useful to hear, but keep them coming. Do participate in the Forest Education Network England Facebook page, and there's a Facebook group as well. I think there's also Twitter, but I'm not on it, but I will get on it. So really, we can keep these conversations going. I will post the recordings. By the way, sorry, I forgot to tell you, I was just recording this last bit of us all together. So the parts that were all together are recorded, just not the breakout groups. Plus all the chat will go up as well. Yeah, so really it's just to say a huge thank you to the time. This is all voluntary, by the way. The Forest Education Network is completely run voluntary. There's no payment of anyone. Everyone comes together because they really value it on a national level. And then obviously your time today, participating in the webinar. Thank you to everyone, especially to the presenters, taking us on a wild foresty romp through everything foresty, and tree, which has been great. I've learned a huge amount. So thank you, Dan, for that excellent overview of all things forestry. Brilliant. You're going to be busy. You're going to be called on again to do that. And to Becky and Sarah as well for from all the different schemes that children get involved with, and what you know, where we can find information and resources and campaigns. I've really enjoyed reconnecting with everyone during this odd time. I'm freelance now, but always happy to talk to anyone at any time. Just ideas, advice. I think you've all got my email from the link sent out, so it's really nice to basically keep the support up for each other, because obviously the sector is expanding rapidly all the time, and often we're on our own out there in the school grounds or in a forest, and coming together to help each other with advice and support is always great. So I think that's us. 3 minutes to 12. Have I missed any thank yous or anything? Anyone else from FEN?
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Jen, for putting all the hard work in to coordinate us all and lead the session. It's been really good.
Well, it's been lovely to see you all, and hopefully post vaccinations or whatever the future holds, we will be back doing the real CPD workshops in forests, doing exactly this, but we'll be leaping around in the trees and learning about them for real. Singing. Yes, thank you for indulging my singing. Lovely. Well, have a good rest of your week, and a safe and happy rest of the year, and look forward to the next FEN webinar in January.
Yeah, at the end of January. We're looking around January the 20th. We've not finalised details yet, so just watch out for more details.
Yeah, good. And if anyone's really keen to get more involved with FEN, there's a little sort of working group, steering group type thing. There's, you know, it's a very open, collaborative organisation. We want to make sure there's every organisation in England to do with trees involved. So just get in touch, and Becky is the chair at the moment, so or any of us that you see on the Facebook page.
Yeah, feel free to email me if you want to get more involved.
Good. Okay, take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye. Great to spend time with you.